In a world where headlines scream of division and uncertainty, sometimes the most powerful moments happen in the quietest corners of society. When two of the most photographed people on earth walk through the sterile corridors of a hospital, something magical occurs. It's not about the cameras or the protocol or the perfectly coordinated outfits. It's about the moment when a tired nurse looks up from her 12-hour shift and sees genuine compassion staring back at her. It's about the doctor who's been fighting an impossible battle suddenly feeling that someone truly understands. It's about hope being restored in the most unexpected way. This is the story of how the Prince and Princess of Wales didn't just visit the NHS in their first engagement of 2026, they reminded an entire nation why some traditions are worth preserving, why service matters more than status, and why sometimes the monarchy's greatest power lies not in its crown, but in its humanity. The morning of January 15, 2026 began like any other at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London. The ancient building, known simply as Bart's to locals, stood as it had for centuries, its weathered stone walls holding within them stories of healing, hope, and heartbreak. But today would be different. Today, the oldest hospital in England would welcome the future King and Queen of England. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before her dressing room mirror at Kensington Palace, carefully considering her outfit choice. The navy blue dress she'd selected wasn't chosen randomly. Navy was the color of trust, of reliability, of the NHS uniform that millions of healthcare workers wore with pride. Her stylist had suggested something more fashionable, more eye-catching, but Catherine knew better. Today wasn't about making a fashion statement. It was about making a connection. 6 miles away at Adelaide Cottage, Prince William was having his own moment of reflection. The 43-year-old heir to the throne had been visiting hospitals since he was a child, but something about this engagement felt different. Perhaps it was the weight of responsibility that seemed to grow heavier each year, or maybe it was the understanding that in a rapidly changing world, the monarchy needed to prove its relevance more than ever. Dr. Sarah Matthews, chief executive of Bart's Health NHS Trust, had been preparing for this visit for weeks. She'd walked the planned route dozens of times, checking every detail, ensuring that the royal couple would see the hospital at its best. But, more importantly, she wanted them to see the truth of what her staff faced every day. The NHS was struggling, and everyone knew it. Staff shortages, budget constraints, and an aging population created challenges that kept her awake at night. Sarah had started her career as a junior doctor 25 years ago, full of idealism and determination to change the world one patient at a time. She'd climbed the ranks through sheer determination, often working 18-hour days, missing family gatherings, and sacrificing her personal life for the greater good. Now, as she prepared to meet the future monarchs, she wondered if they would truly understand the passion that drove her and her colleagues. In the hospital's pediatric ward, staff nurse Emma Thompson was trying to calm 5-year-old Joshua, who was recovering from a complex heart surgery. Joshua had been born with a rare condition that required multiple operations, and his parents, Maria and David, had practically lived at the hospital for months. Emma had become not just Joshua's nurse, but a source of strength for the entire family. She'd held Maria when the diagnosis first came, celebrated with David when Joshua took his first steps after surgery, and spent countless hours reading stories to distract the little boy from his pain. Emma had heard about the royal visit, but she was too busy to think much about it. The ward was short-staffed again, with 3 nurses out sick and no replacements available. She'd already worked 6 straight days and was exhausted, but Joshua needed her, and that was all that mattered. The idea that the Prince and Princess of Wales might actually stop by her ward seemed surreal. What would she say to them? What could they possibly understand about her world? Meanwhile, in the emergency department, Dr. James Harrison was dealing with the usual chaos of a London A&E. At 38, he'd seen it all, from minor cuts requiring a few stitches to life-or-death trauma cases that tested every skill he'd learned in medical school. Today was particularly busy, with a multi-vehicle accident bringing in several serious casualties just as the morning shift began. James had joined the NHS straight out of university, driven by a desire to serve his community and help those in need. His parents had wanted him to go into private practice, where the money was better and the stress was less, but James believed in the NHS mission. Healthcare should be free at the point of need, available to everyone regardless of their ability to pay. It was one of Britain's greatest achievements, and he was proud to be part of it. As he sutured a deep laceration on a construction worker's arm, James couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Here he was, treating people from all walks of life: the homeless man who'd been brought in with pneumonia, the businessman who'd had a heart attack in his expensive car, the teenage girl who'd overdosed on drugs, and, in a few hours, he'd be meeting the future king and queen. In the NHS, everyone was equal. He wondered if the royal couple truly appreciated that fundamental principle. The security preparations had begun before dawn. Detective Inspector Michael Roberts of the Metropolitan Police had been coordinating royal protection for over a decade, but each visit brought its own unique challenges. Hospitals were particularly complex venues; they couldn't be completely shut down or sanitized of the public like other locations. Patients still needed treatment, ambulances still needed access, and the fundamental purpose of the institution had to be maintained. Michael walked through the hospital one final time, checking sightlines, emergency exits, and communication protocols. His team had worked closely with hospital security to ensure a seamless visit, but they all knew that in a building this size, with this many people coming and going, risks could never be completely eliminated. The key was balancing security with accessibility, allowing the royal couple to do their job while keeping them safe. At 9:30 a.m., the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoed across London as the royal aircraft approached the hospital's landing zone. Inside, Prince William was reviewing his briefing notes one final time. He'd learned about the hospital's history, its current challenges, and the specific departments they'd be visiting. But he knew that the real education would come from the people they met: the doctors, nurses, patients, and families who lived this reality every day. Catherine checked her appearance one last time, ensuring that her dress was wrinkle-free and her hair was perfect. She understood that her image would be scrutinized in every photograph, but, more importantly, she knew that her demeanor would set the tone for the entire visit. She needed to be warm but professional, interested but not intrusive, royal but relatable. As the helicopter touched down on the hospital's roof, a small crowd of staff members gathered at the windows to catch a glimpse of the arriving royals. Many of them had never seen a member of the royal family in person, and, despite their best efforts to remain professional, there was an undeniable excitement in the air. Dr. Matthews stood at the entrance with the hospital's senior management team, waiting to greet their distinguished visitors. She'd met royalty before. Prince Charles had visited the hospital several years earlier, but this felt different. William and Catherine represented the future of the monarchy, and their engagement with the NHS would send a powerful message about the institution's relevance in modern Britain. The elevator carrying the royal couple descended slowly through the floors of the hospital, passing through decades of medical history. Each floor told a story: the cancer ward where breakthrough treatments were being developed, the maternity unit where new life entered the world every day, the intensive care unit where battles between life and death were fought with cutting-edge technology and unwavering determination. As the doors opened on the ground floor, Prince William and Princess Catherine stepped into a world that was both familiar and foreign. They'd visited hospitals before, but always with the knowledge that they could leave at any time, return to their comfortable lives, and never face the daily pressures that defined this place. Today, they were here to listen, to learn, and to understand what it truly meant to serve others in the most challenging circumstances. The first handshakes were exchanged, formal introductions made, and smiles offered all around. But, beneath the polished surface of royal protocol, something deeper was beginning to stir. This wouldn't be just another photo opportunity or ceremonial duty. This would be a journey into the heart of public service, a reminder of why institutions like the monarchy and the NHS existed in the first place: to serve others, regardless of personal cost or convenience. As they began their tour, walking through corridors filled with hope and healing, none of them could have predicted how profoundly this day would affect not just their understanding of each other's worlds, but their view of service, duty, and the true meaning of leadership in the modern age. The cameras were rolling, the public was watching, but what mattered most was happening in the quiet moments between the scheduled events: the real conversations, the genuine connections, and the slowly dawning realization that sometimes the most important work happens far from the spotlight, in places where compassion matters more than crowns. The first stop on their carefully planned route was the emergency department, where Dr. James Harrison waited with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. He changed into his best scrubs and made sure his stethoscope was polished, though he immediately felt foolish for caring about such trivial details. These were people, he reminded himself, not gods to be worshipped. When Prince William extended his hand for a shake, James was struck by how normal the gesture felt. The prince's grip was firm but not crushing, his smile genuine rather than practiced. "Dr. Harrison, thank you for taking time from what I'm sure is an incredibly busy schedule," William said, and James found himself relaxing despite the cameras recording every word. "Your Royal Highness, it's an honor," James replied, then immediately wondered if he should have said something more profound. But Catherine's warm smile put him at ease as she joined the conversation. "Please, tell us about your work here," she said, and James was surprised by how genuinely interested she seemed. This wasn't the mechanical politeness he'd expected from royal small talk. James began explaining the challenges of modern emergency medicine, the increasing number of patients, the complex cases that required specialized care, and the constant pressure to do more with less. As he spoke, he watched their faces, looking for signs of boredom or impatience, but instead found engaged listeners who asked thoughtful questions. "How do you manage the emotional toll?" Catherine asked, and James paused, surprised by the depth of the question. "I imagine seeing suffering every day must be incredibly difficult." The question touched something deep in James's chest. In all his years of practice, few people had asked him about that aspect of his work. Family members worried about his long hours and missed dinners, administrators cared about efficiency metrics and budget targets, but rarely did anyone acknowledge the emotional weight that healthcare workers carried. "It is difficult," James admitted, his voice softer now. "Some days, you lose patience despite doing everything right. Other days, you save someone who shouldn't have survived. You learn to compartmentalize, but it never stops affecting you. The key is remembering why you started this work in the first place." Prince William nodded thoughtfully. "That sense of purpose must be what keeps you going through the hardest times." "Exactly," James said, feeling understood in a way he hadn't expected. "When you see a patient recover, when you help a family through their worst moment, when you know that what you do matters, that makes everything else worthwhile." As they moved through the emergency department, James showed them the state-of-the-art trauma bay where critical patients received immediate care. He explained the triage system, the importance of rapid decision-making, and the teamwork required to save lives. But what surprised him most was how the royal couple seemed more interested in the human stories than the technical details. They met Sarah, a paramedic who'd been with the London Ambulance Service for 15 years. She was taking a rare break between calls, and her uniform showed the wear of someone who'd been working hard all night. When Catherine asked about her experiences, Sarah's tough exterior softened as she shared stories of the people she'd helped and the colleagues who'd become like family to her. "The public sees us for maybe 10 minutes of their worst day," Sarah explained. "But we see people at their most vulnerable, their most frightened. It's a privilege, really, to be trusted with that." Prince William asked about the challenges facing ambulance services, and Sarah didn't hold back. Response times were suffering due to staff shortages and increased demand. Equipment was aging and needed replacement. The job was physically and emotionally demanding, with wages that barely reflected the skill and dedication required. "But you continue because you believe in the mission," Catherine observed, and Sarah nodded emphatically. "The NHS isn't perfect," Sarah said, "but it represents something beautiful, the idea that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege for those who can afford it. I've seen what happens in countries without universal healthcare. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else." Their next stop was the cardiac unit, where they met Dr. Amara Okafor, a brilliant surgeon who joined Bart's after completing her training at some of the world's most prestigious medical centers. Amara had chosen to work in the NHS despite offers from private hospitals that would have doubled her salary. Her passion for her work was immediately evident as she explained the complex procedures that saved lives every day. "This morning, I operated on a 70-year-old grandmother who had a massive heart attack," Amara shared as she led them through the unit. "She's a cleaner who's worked her entire life, never earned much money, but has 5 grandchildren who adore her. In a private system, she might not have received the same level of care. Here, she gets the best we can provide regardless of her bank account." Catherine asked to meet some of the patients, if they were comfortable with the visit. In the recovery ward, they were introduced to Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, an 82-year-old retired teacher who'd undergone heart surgery 3 days earlier. Despite her obvious fatigue, Mrs. Hartwell's eyes lit up when she saw the royal visitors. "Your Majesty," she said to Catherine, clearly delighted, "I never imagined I'd meet a real princess in my pajamas." Catherine laughed warmly and sat down beside the bed. "You look absolutely lovely, Mrs. Hartwell. How are you feeling?" "Oh, much better now," Eleanor replied. "Dr. Okafor is a miracle worker. 40 years I taught children, and I thought my story was ending, but she's given me more chapters to write." Prince William asked about her teaching career, and Eleanor's face glowed as she shared stories of the students she'd inspired over 4 decades in the classroom. She'd taught in inner-city schools, working with children from disadvantaged backgrounds, believing passionately that education could transform lives. "The NHS took care of me when I needed it most," Eleanor said, her voice growing serious. "Just like the schools took care of my students. Public service matters, Your Royal Highness. It's what makes us civilized." The comment hung in the air as they moved on, but both William and Catherine found themselves thinking about Eleanor's words. Here was someone who'd devoted her life to serving others, now being served in return by an institution that embodied the same values. In the pediatric ward, they encountered a different energy entirely. The walls were covered with colorful murals and children's artwork, transforming the clinical environment into something more hopeful and welcoming. Nurse Emma Thompson was waiting for them, having finally found a moment away from her patients. Emma's exhaustion was visible, the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that came from too much caffeine and too little sleep, but her spirit remained unbroken. When she spoke about her work, her voice carried a passion that transcended her fatigue. "Children are different from adult patients," Emma explained as they walked through the ward. "They haven't learned to be afraid of hope yet. They believe in recovery, in getting better, in going home. It's both heartbreaking and inspiring." They stopped outside a room where 5-year-old Joshua was playing with building blocks, his parents sitting nearby. Emma had asked permission to introduce the royal visitors, and the family had enthusiastically agreed. "Joshua loves princesses," Emma whispered to Catherine with a smile. "He's been asking if any live in the castle near his house." When Catherine knelt down to Joshua's level, his eyes widened with wonder. "Are you a real princess?" he asked in the direct way that only children possess. "I am," Catherine replied seriously. "And I've heard you're very brave. Is that true?" Joshua nodded solemnly. "The doctors fixed my heart so it works better. Nurse Emma says I'm her superhero patient." Prince William joined the conversation, asking Joshua about his building blocks and listening intently as the boy explained the elaborate castle he was constructing. For a few minutes, the formality of the royal visit disappeared entirely, replaced by genuine human connection. Joshua's parents, Maria and David, watched with tears in their eyes as their son chatted confidently with the future King and Queen of England. Their journey had been terrifying, the diagnosis, the surgeries, the uncertain prognosis, but moments like this reminded them that their son was still a normal little boy with dreams and imagination. "The staff here have been our family," Maria told Catherine quietly while Joshua was distracted by his building blocks. "When we were at our lowest point, when we didn't know if Joshua would survive, they held us together. Emma worked extra shifts just to be here during his surgery. Dr. Patel called us at home on Christmas Day to check how Joshua was doing. This place, these people, they're angels." Catherine squeezed Maria's hand gently. "He's lucky to have such loving parents, and you're all lucky to have such dedicated caregivers." As they prepared to leave the pediatric ward, Emma walked them to the elevator. In the brief private moment before the doors opened, she looked directly at both royal visitors. "Your Royal Highnesses," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I hope you can see what we see every day. This isn't just about medicine or politics or budgets. It's about believing that every life has value, that every person deserves dignity, that caring for each other is what makes us human. The NHS isn't perfect, but it's built on something beautiful." The elevator doors closed, leaving them in a moment of contemplative silence as they rose to their next destination. Both William and Catherine were beginning to understand that this visit was changing them in ways they hadn't anticipated. They'd come to show support for NHS staff, but they were receiving something far more valuable in return: a deeper understanding of what true service meant and why institutions dedicated to helping others were worth preserving and protecting, regardless of the cost or complexity involved. The maternity ward presented an entirely different atmosphere as Prince William and Princess Catherine stepped off the elevator. Here, the sounds were not of illness and worry, but of new life beginning its journey into the world. Midwife Helen Clark had been working at Bart's for nearly 30 years, and her weathered hands had helped deliver thousands of babies. She greeted the royal couple with the confidence that came from decades of experience in bringing comfort to families during one of life's most vulnerable moments. "Welcome to the Miracle Department," Helen said with a warm smile that immediately put them at ease. "This is where hope lives, even on the darkest days." Helen's journey to midwifery hadn't been traditional. She'd started as a young mother herself, struggling to make ends meet as a single parent. When she'd given birth to her daughter at this very hospital 28 years ago, the midwife who'd helped her had shown such kindness and strength that Helen knew she wanted to provide that same support to other women. "Childbirth is the great equalizer," Helen explained as she led them through the ward. "Duchess or dustwoman, CEO or cleaning lady, when you're in labor, you're just a woman bringing life into the world. Fear looks the same on every face, and joy sounds the same in every voice." They stopped at the nursery, where newborns slept peacefully in their transparent cribs. Catherine's face softened as she watched the tiny babies, some barely hours old, already showing distinct personalities in the way they slept or moved their miniature hands. "It never gets old," Helen observed, watching Catherine's expression. "I've seen thousands of births, but every single one still feels like a miracle. These little ones have no idea what kind of world they're entering, but they arrive with such determination to live." Prince William asked about the challenges facing maternity services, and Helen's expression grew more serious. Funding pressures meant fewer midwives, longer hours, and less time for the individualized care that made such a difference during labor and delivery. Some units across the country had been forced to close, making the remaining ones struggle to meet demand. "We do our best," Helen said, "but sometimes I worry that we're so focused on meeting targets and managing budgets that we forget these are the most important moments in people's lives. A woman should feel safe and supported when she's giving birth, not rushed or processed like she's on an assembly line." They were introduced to Dr. Priya Sharma, a consultant obstetrician who'd recently joined the hospital after completing advanced training in high-risk pregnancies. Dr. Sharma had turned down lucrative offers from private clinics because she believed that all women, regardless of their financial circumstances, deserved access to the best possible care during pregnancy and childbirth. "I specialize in cases where things don't go according to plan," Dr. Sharma explained. "Women with diabetes, heart conditions, previous pregnancy complications, conditions that require specialized monitoring and care. In other healthcare systems, these women might not receive the level of attention they need. Here, we can provide world-class care regardless of their ability to pay." Catherine asked about her motivation for choosing such challenging work, and Dr. Sharma's response revealed the passion that drove her daily efforts. "My mother nearly died giving birth to me in India because she couldn't afford proper medical care," Dr. Sharma shared. "She survived, but the experience shaped my entire life. When I moved to Britain and saw the NHS, I knew this was where I belonged. No woman should risk her life bringing life into the world simply because of her economic circumstances." They visited the neonatal intensive care unit, where the tiniest patients fought their biggest battles. Nurse specialist Rachel Williams had worked in NICU for 15 years, caring for premature babies and infants with complex medical conditions. Her unit was filled with sophisticated equipment that monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every vital sign of the vulnerable babies under her care. "These little fighters teach me something new every day," Rachel said as she showed them around the unit. "Babies born at 24 weeks who shouldn't survive, but somehow find the strength to grow and thrive. Parents who never imagined they'd spend months living at a hospital, but discover reserves of love and determination they never knew they possessed." In one corner of the unit, they met Mark and Jennifer Richardson, whose twins had been born 10 weeks premature. The babies, Oliver and Emma, were now doing well, but the first few weeks had been touch and go. Mark, a bus driver, and Jennifer, a shop assistant, had never expected to navigate the complex world of neonatal intensive care. "We were terrified," Jennifer admitted as she gently touched Oliver's tiny hand through the incubator opening. "We didn't understand any of the medical terms, all the machines looked frightening, and we felt so helpless. But the staff here became our teachers, our support system, our hope when we couldn't find any ourselves." Mark nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Rachel sat with us for hours explaining what every beep and alarm meant. Dr. Khan called us personally whenever there was any change in the baby's condition. They never made us feel stupid for asking the same questions over and over. Prince William asked about the long-term outcomes for premature babies, and Dr. Khan, the lead neonatologist, explained how advances in medical technology and specialized care had dramatically improved survival rates and long-term development prospects. 20 years ago, babies born at the gestation Oliver and Emma were born had much lower chances of survival and higher risks of long-term complications, Dr. Khan explained. Now, with better understanding of premature infant physiology and improved treatments, many of these children go on to live completely normal lives." The conversation shifted to the challenges facing the unit. Dr. Khan spoke candidly about the shortage of specialized nurses, the cost of maintaining state-of-the-art equipment, and the emotional toll that working with critically ill infants took on staff members. "We lose colleagues to burnout and better-paying positions in private healthcare," Dr. Khan admitted. "It's hard to compete financially, so we have to rely on people's commitment to the mission. Fortunately, most people who choose to work in NICU are here because they believe in what we're doing, not because of the salary." Catherine spent several minutes talking with Rachel about the emotional aspects of her work. How did she cope with losing babies despite everyone's best efforts? How did she maintain hope when facing situations that seemed hopeless? "You learn to celebrate every small victory," Rachel explained. A baby taking their first breath without assistance, a mother finally able to hold her child, a family going home together after months of uncertainty. "You also learn that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help a family say goodbye with dignity and love." Their next stop was the cancer ward, where the atmosphere was different yet again. Here, patients and families faced uncertain futures with courage that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Dr. Michael Chen, the lead oncologist, had chosen cancer medicine because he believed in the power of hope combined with cutting-edge science to change outcomes that had once been considered hopeless. "Cancer treatment has changed dramatically in just the past decade," Dr. Chen explained as he walked them through the unit. "Treatments that didn't exist 5 years ago are now saving lives. Immunotherapy, targeted therapies, precision medicine, we're in a golden age of cancer treatment, but only if patients can access these advances." They met Sarah Henderson, a 43-year-old mother of 2 who was receiving treatment for breast cancer. Sarah had been diagnosed 6 months earlier during a routine screening and had undergone surgery followed by chemotherapy. Her positive attitude was remarkable given the circumstances. "The diagnosis was terrifying," Sarah admitted. "You think about your children, your husband, everything you might miss. But, from the moment I walked into this hospital, I felt like I was surrounded by people who understood exactly what I was facing and were determined to help me beat this." Sarah's husband, Paul, had taken leave from his job as an accountant to be with her during treatments. Their children, aged 12 and 14, were learning to cope with their mother's illness with the support of the hospital's family counselors. "The medical care is just one part of what this place provides," Paul explained. "They've helped our whole family understand what's happening, deal with our fears, and maintain hope for the future." Sarah's not just a patient here, she's part of a community that's committed to helping her get well. Catherine asked Sarah about her hopes for the future, and Sarah's response revealed the depth of her determination. "I want to see my children graduate, get married, have children of their own," Sarah said simply. "This disease tried to steal my future, but, with the help of everyone here, I'm fighting to reclaim it. Every day I'm alive is a victory, and I'm planning to accumulate a lot of victories." Dr. Chen introduced them to members of his research team, who were working on clinical trials for new cancer treatments. The hospital's participation in cutting-edge research meant that patients had access to potential breakthrough therapies years before they became widely available. "Research is hope with a laboratory behind it," Dr. Chen said. Every patient who participates in a clinical trial is not only potentially helping themselves but also contributing to knowledge that might save lives for decades to come. The royal couple met Dr. Lisa Wong, a research fellow who was investigating new approaches to treating pancreatic cancer, one of the most challenging forms of the disease. Her work was meticulous, methodical, and driven by the knowledge that every small advance could translate into extended life for patients facing this diagnosis. The work can be frustrating, Dr. Wong admitted. Research moves slowly, and, for every promising lead, there are dozens of dead ends. But, when you meet patients who are alive today because of treatments that were experimental just a few years ago, you remember why persistence matters. As they concluded their visit to the cancer ward, both William and Catherine found themselves deeply moved by the combination of medical expertise, research innovation, and human compassion they'd witnessed. The patients they'd met faced uncertain futures, but they were supported by a system that combined the best of science with unwavering commitment to human dignity. What strikes me most, Catherine said to Dr. Chen as they prepared to move on, is how everyone here seems to see their work as more than just a job. There's a sense of mission that's almost spiritual. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Cancer teaches you that life is precious and finite. Working with cancer patients reminds you every day that what you do matters in the most fundamental way possible. It changes how you see everything else. As they walked toward their final destination, both royal visitors were beginning to understand that their engagement with the NHS wasn't just about showing support for healthcare workers. It was about witnessing the embodiment of values that seemed increasingly rare in modern society, the belief that caring for others was not just a professional obligation but a moral imperative, and that a society's true measure wasn't its wealth or power but its commitment to protecting and nurturing its most vulnerable members. The mental health unit occupied a quieter wing of the hospital, designed with natural light and calming colors that created an atmosphere of peace rather than clinical efficiency. Dr. Fatima Al-Rashid, the consultant psychiatrist who led the team, had spent 15 years working to destigmatize mental health treatment and integrate psychiatric care into mainstream medicine. Mental health is still the part of healthcare that people whisper about, Dr. Al-Rashid explained as she welcomed Prince William and Princess Catherine to her unit. But, the brain is an organ just like the heart or liver. When it's not functioning properly, it needs medical attention, not shame or secrecy. Dr. Al-Rashid's own journey to psychiatry had been shaped by personal experience. Her younger brother had struggled with severe depression and anxiety as a teenager, and the family's search for help had revealed how difficult it was to access quality mental health care. She dedicated her career to ensuring that other families wouldn't face the same obstacles. We see everything here, she continued, from teenagers experiencing their first episodes of anxiety to elderly patients dealing with dementia-related behavioral changes. What they all have in common is that they're human beings who deserve compassion, understanding, and effective treatment. They met Thomas Wright, a 22-year-old university student who was recovering from a severe depressive episode that had nearly cost him his life. Thomas had agreed to speak with the royal visitors about his experience, hoping that his story might help others understand that mental illness could affect anyone, regardless of background or circumstances. 6 months ago, I was a normal student studying engineering, Thomas began, his voice quiet but steady. I had friends, good grades, plans for the future. Then, gradually, everything started feeling meaningless. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate, couldn't see any point in continuing. Thomas's parents, Robert and Susan Wright, sat beside him as he spoke. Robert was a bank manager, Susan a primary school teacher, and they'd felt completely unprepared to help their son navigate his mental health crisis. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't understand what, Susan explained. Thomas had always been such a positive, motivated young man. When he started talking about not wanting to be alive anymore, we were terrified. We didn't know where to turn or how to help. The family had initially struggled to access mental health services, facing long waiting lists and limited options for immediate intervention. When Thomas's condition deteriorated to the point where he required hospitalization, the mental health team at Barts had provided not just clinical treatment but also education and support for the entire family. Dr. Al-Rashid and her team didn't just treat Thomas, Robert said, his voice filled with gratitude. They taught us how to recognize warning signs, how to communicate with someone experiencing depression, how to support recovery without enabling dependence. They saved our son's life, but they also saved our family. Catherine asked Thomas about his recovery process, and his response revealed both the challenges and the hope inherent in mental health treatment. Recovery isn't linear, Thomas explained. There are good days and bad days, setbacks and breakthroughs. But I've learned that mental illness doesn't define me or limit what I can achieve. With proper treatment and support, I can manage my condition and live a full life. Dr. Al-Rashid introduced them to Sarah Mitchell, a mental health nurse who specialized in working with young people experiencing their first episodes of psychosis. Sarah's approach combined clinical expertise with deep empathy, helping patients and families navigate one of the most frightening experiences in mental health. Early intervention is crucial with psychosis, Sarah explained. The sooner we can provide appropriate treatment, the better the long-term outcomes. But families often don't know what they're dealing with or where to seek help. They met 18-year-old Jordan Phillips, who was participating in the early intervention program after experiencing his first psychotic episode. Jordan's mother, Angela, had initially thought her son was just going through typical teenage rebellion when his behavior began to change. Jordan started hearing voices, believing things that weren't real, becoming paranoid about everyday situations, Angela recounted. I thought it was stress from school or just teenage drama. I had no idea he was experiencing a serious mental health condition. Jordan, now stabilized on medication and engaged in therapy, spoke about his experience with remarkable insight for someone so young. The hardest part wasn't the symptoms themselves, but feeling like I was losing my mind and couldn't trust my own thoughts, Jordan said. Sarah and the team here helped me understand that this was an illness, not a personal failing, and that with treatment, I could learn to manage it. Prince William asked about the challenges facing mental health services, and Dr. Al-Rashid didn't hesitate to discuss the significant obstacles they encountered daily. Mental health has historically been underfunded compared to physical health services, she explained. We're seeing more demand than ever before, partly because stigma is decreasing and people are more willing to seek help, but also because social and economic pressures are contributing to increased mental health challenges. The conversation turned to the impact of social media and modern technology on young people's mental health. Dr. Al-Rashid and her team were seeing increasing numbers of teenagers struggling with anxiety, depression, and body image issues that seemed connected to their online experiences. Technology is a tool that can be helpful or harmful depending on how it's used, Dr. Al-Rashid observed. Social media can provide connection and support, but it can also create unrealistic expectations and constant comparison with others. We're learning how to help young people develop healthy relationships with technology. Their next stop was the hospital's Staff Wellbeing Center, a relatively new addition that recognized the emotional and psychological toll that healthcare work could take on those providing care. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, an occupational health psychologist, had developed programs to support staff members dealing with stress, burnout, and traumatic experiences. Healthcare workers are human beings first, Dr. Thompson explained. They experience the same mental health challenges as everyone else, plus the additional stress that comes from constantly caring for others in high-pressure situations. The Wellbeing Center offered counseling services, stress management workshops, peer support groups, and resources for staff members struggling with various challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic had highlighted the importance of supporting healthcare workers' mental health, but the need had existed long before the pandemic and would continue long after. They met Dr. James Patterson, an emergency physician who'd been using the well-being services to address symptoms of post-traumatic stress after a particularly difficult period in the emergency department. James had initially been reluctant to seek help, worried that it might affect his career or colleagues' perception of his competence. There's still a culture in medicine that expects us to be invulnerable, James admitted. We're supposed to save lives and solve problems, not have problems ourselves. But that's not realistic or healthy. Dr. Thompson had helped James understand that seeking support was a sign of strength, not weakness, and that addressing mental health challenges would ultimately make him a better physician and a healthier person. The irony is that doctors who don't take care of themselves can't provide optimal care for their patients, Dr. Thompson observed. Supporting staff well-being isn't just good for the individuals involved, it's essential for the quality of patient care. Catherine asked about the broader implications of healthcare worker burnout, and Dr. Thompson's response highlighted a crisis that extended far beyond individual hospitals. We're losing experienced healthcare workers to burnout and stress-related illnesses at a rate that's unsustainable, she explained. Every nurse or doctor who leaves the profession because of mental health challenges represents years of training and expertise that's lost to the system. The royal couple was introduced to Maria Santos, a critical care nurse who'd been struggling with anxiety and depression after caring for COVID-19 patients during the worst phases of the pandemic. Maria had witnessed more death and suffering in 2 years than she'd expected to see in an entire career, and the emotional impact had been overwhelming. I kept thinking I should be stronger, that I'd chosen this profession and should be able to handle anything, Maria said. But, watching so many people die, seeing families unable to say goodbye, feeling like nothing we did was enough, it broke something in me. Through counseling and peer support, Maria had learned coping strategies and begun to process her experiences in healthier ways. She'd returned to work with a better understanding of her limits and the importance of self-care. I'm still a nurse because I believe in what we do, Maria explained. But now I also understand that taking care of myself isn't selfish, it's necessary if I want to continue taking care of others. As their visit to the Wellbeing Center concluded, both William and Catherine found themselves reflecting on the complexity of healthcare work. The staff they'd met throughout the day had chosen careers dedicated to helping others, but they were also human beings with their own vulnerabilities and needs. Dr. Sarah Matthews, the chief executive, rejoined them for the final portion of their visit. She wanted to discuss the broader challenges facing the NHS and the importance of public understanding and support for healthcare services. The NHS is more than just a healthcare system, Dr. Matthews explained as they walked through the hospital's main corridor. It represents a social contract, a commitment to caring for each other regardless of circumstances. But that contract requires investment, understanding, and support from society as a whole. The conversation touched on funding challenges, staffing shortages, aging infrastructure, and increasing demand for services. But it also highlighted the remarkable dedication of healthcare workers who continue to provide excellent care despite these obstacles. What you've seen today represents thousands of similar stories happening across the country every day, Dr. Matthews continued. Healthcare workers who choose to serve others, patients and families who find strength they never knew they had, communities that come together to support each other through difficult times. Prince William asked about the future of the NHS, and Dr. Matthews's response reflected both realism and optimism. The challenges are significant, but so is the determination to overcome them, she said. Every generation of healthcare workers has faced obstacles and found ways to innovate, adapt, and continue providing care. What matters is maintaining the core values that make the NHS special, the belief that healthcare is a human right, that everyone deserves dignity and compassion, and that caring for each other makes us stronger as a society. As they prepared for the final portion of their visit, both William and Catherine understood that they'd witnessed something profound. The NHS wasn't just a healthcare system, it was a living embodiment of values that defined British society at its best. The question now was how to ensure that these values and the institution that represented them would continue to thrive for future generations. The final hour of the royal visit was spent in the hospital's education and training center, where the next generation of healthcare professionals was learning the skills and values that would define their careers. Professor David Kumar, Director of Medical Education, had spent decades training young doctors and nurses, watching them transform from eager students into confident healthcare providers. This is where it all begins, Professor Kumar explained as he led Prince William and Princess Catherine through the simulation laboratory. We can teach clinical skills and medical knowledge, but what really matters is helping these young people understand the responsibility they're taking on. The simulation lab contained sophisticated equipment that allowed medical students to practice procedures on mannequins that could replicate virtually any medical emergency. Students could make mistakes, learn from them, and develop confidence in a safe environment before treating real patients. They watched a group of second-year medical students working through a cardiac arrest simulation. The students moved with increasing confidence as they performed CPR, administered medications, and communicated with each other as a team. Their instructor, Dr. Amanda Foster, provided guidance and feedback while allowing them to learn through experience. These students are remarkable, Dr. Foster told the royal visitors. They've chosen one of the most challenging careers possible, knowing that they'll face years of difficult training, long hours, and enormous responsibility. But they're here because they want to help people. Catherine asked one of the students, 22-year-old Amara Okafor, about her motivation for choosing medicine. Amara's response reflected the idealism and determination that drew people to healthcare careers. My grandmother received incredible care from the NHS when she had cancer, Amara explained. The doctors and nurses didn't just treat her disease, they treated her with dignity and compassion during the most frightening time of her life. I want to provide that same level of care for other families. Prince William asked about the challenges of medical education, and Professor Kumar discussed the balancing act between training competent clinicians and maintaining the humanistic values that define excellent healthcare. Technical skills can be taught relatively easily, Professor Kumar observed. What's harder to teach is empathy, compassion, and the ability to see each patient as a unique individual with their own fears, hopes, and needs. Those qualities can't be memorized from textbooks. They met nursing student Rebecca Chen, who was completing her final year of training and would soon qualify as a registered nurse. Rebecca had chosen nursing after working as a healthcare assistant and seeing firsthand the impact that skilled, caring nurses could have on patient outcomes. Nursing is about being present with people during their most vulnerable moments, Rebecca explained. It's technical and scientific, but it's also deeply human. You're not just monitoring vital signs or administering medications, you're providing comfort, advocacy, and hope. Rebecca's clinical instructor, Helen Clark, whom they'd met earlier in the maternity ward, spoke about the evolution of nursing education and practice over her 3-decade career. Nursing has become increasingly sophisticated, Helen observed. Today's nurses need advanced clinical skills, critical thinking abilities, and the capacity to work with complex technology. But the heart of nursing, caring for people, remains unchanged. The conversation turned to recruitment and retention challenges facing healthcare education. Professor Kumar explained that while many young people were attracted to healthcare careers, the demands of training and practice meant that not everyone who started the journey would complete it. We lose students and newly qualified practitioners for various reasons, Professor Kumar admitted. The emotional demands, the physical requirements, the work-life balance challenges, healthcare careers aren't suitable for everyone. Our job is to prepare students realistically while supporting them through the difficulties. They visited the library and study areas where students spent countless hours learning anatomy, pharmacology, pathophysiology, and hundreds of other subjects essential to safe practice. The dedication required was evident in the stacks of textbooks, the late-night study sessions, and the determination visible on students' faces as they prepared for examinations that would determine their professional futures. Dr. Matthews rejoined them for a roundtable discussion with senior staff members about the future of the NHS and healthcare in Britain. The conversation included representatives from various departments: medicine, nursing, allied health professions, administration, and support services, creating a comprehensive picture of the institution's complexity and challenges. The NHS faces an uncertain future, Dr. Matthews began honestly. Demographic changes mean an aging population with more complex health needs. Technological advances create new possibilities but also new costs. Social and economic pressures affect both patient health and our ability to recruit and retain staff. Dr. Chen from the oncology department raised the issue of research funding and the importance of maintaining Britain's position as a leader in medical innovation. The discoveries we make today become the standard treatments of tomorrow, he explained. But research requires sustained investment and support. Countries that reduce their commitment to medical research quickly fall behind in their ability to provide cutting-edge care. Nurse Helen Clark spoke about the practical challenges of delivering care with limited resources and increasing demands. Every day, we're asked to do more with less, she said. More patients, more complex conditions, more documentation requirements, but fewer staff and tighter budgets. At some point, something has to give, and we can't let it be the quality of patient care. Catherine asked about the role of technology in addressing these challenges, and Dr. Patterson from the emergency department offered his perspective. Technology can make us more efficient and improve patient outcomes, but it can't replace human compassion and judgment, he observed. Patients need to feel that someone cares about them as individuals, not just as medical problems to be solved. The discussion touched on the importance of public understanding and support for the NHS. Several staff members emphasized that healthcare was everyone's responsibility, not just that of healthcare workers. People need to understand that the NHS isn't magic, Dr. Al-Rashid from the Mental Health Unit explained. It requires investment, maintenance, and realistic expectations. It also requires people to take responsibility for their own health and to use services appropriately. Prince William asked about the most important message they wanted the public to understand, and Dr. Matthews summarized the collective thoughts of her colleagues. The NHS represents the best of human nature, the desire to care for each other, especially those who are most vulnerable, she said. But it's not self-sustaining. It needs support, investment, and commitment from society as a whole. Most importantly, it needs people to remember that healthcare is fundamentally about human relationships, the connection between those who provide care and those who receive it. As the formal visit concluded, both William and Catherine requested a few minutes to walk through the hospital once more, this time with less fanfare and fewer cameras. They wanted to absorb what they'd experienced and say personal thank yous to some of the staff they'd met. In the pediatric ward, they stopped to check on Joshua, who proudly showed Catherine the castle he'd completed. His parents watched with joy as their son chatted confidently with the royal visitors, a normal little boy whose future had been secured by the skill and dedication of his healthcare team. In the emergency department, they found Dr. Harrison treating a patient who'd just arrived with chest pain. He looked up briefly, nodded acknowledgement, and returned to his work. The moment perfectly captured the priorities that define excellent healthcare. Patients came first, everything else was secondary. They encountered Nurse Emma Thompson finishing her shift after 14 hours on duty. Her exhaustion was evident, but so was her satisfaction with the day's work. 3 of her patients were going home, 2 were showing significant improvement, and 1 family had received news that their child's latest test results were encouraging. "Thank you for what you do," Catherine said simply, and Emma's tired smile brightened momentarily. "Thank you for coming to see it," Emma replied. "It means more than you might realize." As they walked toward the exit, both William and Catherine were quiet, processing everything they'd witnessed. The helicopter waited on the roof to return them to their comfortable lives, but they knew they were leaving behind something that would stay with them forever. Dr. Matthews accompanied them to the elevator for final farewells. As they waited for the doors to open, she offered one last thought. "Your Royal Highnesses, what you've seen today happens in hospitals across the country every single day," she said. "Ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they believe that caring for others is the most important work anyone can do. The NHS isn't perfect, but it's built on something beautiful, the idea that everyone deserves dignity, compassion, and care when they need it most." The elevator doors opened, and, as they rose toward the helicopter, both William and Catherine understood that this engagement had changed them. They'd come to show support for NHS staff, but they'd received something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of what service truly meant and why institutions dedicated to helping others were worth preserving and protecting. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them back to their royal duties and responsibilities. But, below them, the work continued. Doctors diagnosing illnesses and planning treatments. Nurses providing comfort and administering medications. Families hoping and worrying and celebrating small victories. Researchers seeking breakthrough discoveries that might save lives decades in the future. As London spread out beneath them, both William and Catherine knew that their first engagement of 2026 had given them something precious, a reminder that the monarchy's greatest purpose wasn't ceremony or tradition, but service to others. They'd witnessed that same spirit of service in every person they'd met at the hospital, from senior consultants to cleaning staff, from experienced nurses to student doctors. The NHS, like the monarchy itself, represented something increasingly rare in the modern world, institutions built not for profit or personal gain, but for the common good. Both faced uncertain futures and significant challenges, but both were sustained by people who believed that serving others was not just a job but a calling. In the days that followed, the images and stories from the visit would be shared across the country and around the world. But, for William and Catherine, the real impact wouldn't be measured in media coverage or public approval ratings. It would be measured in their deeper understanding of what it meant to dedicate one's life to serving others, and their renewed commitment to ensuring that institutions like the NHS and the monarchy continued to embody those values for future generations. The royal visit to St. Bartholomew's Hospital had ended, but the connections made and lessons learned would endure. In a world that often seemed divided by differences, they'd witnessed the power of shared humanity and common purpose. They'd seen proof that some things, compassion, dignity, the commitment to caring for others, transcended politics, economics, and social divisions. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, the staff at Bart's returned to their work with renewed energy and purpose. They'd been reminded that what they did mattered, not just to their patients and families, but to the very fabric of society itself. The royal visit was over, but the real work, the daily miracle of healing, caring, and serving others, continued as it always had and always would, sustained by ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they believed that everyone deserved to be cared for with dignity and compassion.